Going on. This here is Organismic Concepts in Biology and Physics by T.A. Goudge in the Review of Metaphysics. And this is from 1953. So this is a classic paper at this point. But like as always, this is my first time reading it. I am not endorsing it. Just trying to see what's good, what's bad. You let me know if you have any questions. So I can't say the word that. I don't think I said organismic. I said organismic. Viper says, from what fucking televisions were an emergent technology? From when fucking televisions were an emergent I don't know what that question is, Vipers. This is preventable? Nothing's preventable. We're all like, everything's necessitated. Thought everyone here was a fucking determinist. Okay. Oh, it's a statement. Okay. All right, here we go. This is from when TV was groundbreaking innovation. This is preventative? No. What are you talking about? Nothing's preventative. It's all I think I've said this on stream before, but when I was a teenager, I was a fatalist. I thought everything was just going to happen one way or the other. That was great when you're a teenager because it absolves you of any moral responsibility. That means I could just get to do things and not feel so bad about it because, hey, it was all going to happen anyway. Oh, it's preventative. Well, I don't think that's how it works. You get a channel redeem. I will do my best to follow my own rules. Oh, to help me saying it by accident, like don't think about a pink elephant. Thank you. I see what you're up to. Okay, so here we go. Professor Bertalanffy's Problems of Life is a welcome English translation of Das Biologische Welttilg. Sorry about my German and anything that's not like dumb English. Which was first published in 1949. Viper says this is from when home telephones were on the uptake. 45% of households having a phone by 1945, 75% by 1957. And yeah, now I bet we have multiple phones per household just because of like how many people have cell phones. So it's going to be like over 100% per household. Okay, the book contains a comprehensive discussion of the theoretical foundations of biology from the organismic point of view, which the author has been advocating for a number of years. World War II philosophy, yes. Since I always find it interesting that everybody finds papers written in the last century to be like outdated, like philosophy is doing some amazing, innovative stuff where we can't get ideas from the 50s anymore. That's fair. A lot of what's going on nowadays in like analytic philosophy is, I mean, you have to remember, there's a sociology to the business, maybe not the business, but the production of academic philosophy nowadays. You have to have like journals that are churning out papers so people can get like, promotions so that they can like justify their jobs to their universities, all this sort of like capitalistic bullshit. And so the way philosophy has worked was like, people used to write stuff on interesting topics, but they weren't getting paid or the reward system wasn't in place the way it is now. And so, yeah, it's like to be on the cutting edge of philosophy now is to be at the, oh wait, I did not put the link in. See, yeah, I don't stream for a week and I start fucking things up. So that's part of it. But yeah, it's like, but that also means a lot of what gets done nowadays is not that, like, it's sort of incremental. And so a lot of what's happening nowadays is you're doing a lot of incremental progress, which is still progress and still good, but it's also, they're, taking less risk. They're making minor changes to positions. And so it's like, yeah, a lot of it will be forgotten in 10 years. And that doesn't mean it was wasted. It just means they weren't doing anything groundbreaking. They were just, directing the sort of way we were heading. So yeah. I'm sure the arguments are pretty similar. It's the dressage and symbols used to explain that change in time. Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of it. And you find that the arguments are very similar. Yeah, and I see you search by topic systematic, not by date, and for philosophy anyway. Yeah, you should let the text speak for itself before prejudging what you're saying. Yeah. It's all computer now. We can do things we couldn't before with logic systems. That's true, but there's a lot more philosophy than just what can be done in logic. the year that Sputnik 1 launched, the year the first personal computer was released, the year the pill and the bubble wrap were invented. Yeah, like it's like before sliced bread. This is before bubble wrap. Latvian says discussions of landlines and televisions are not LLMs and cryptocurrency. Yeah. But again, some of our best philosophy of technology is coming out of this period also. I mean, this is when Heidegger was writing his essay on the philosophy of technology. So technology is technology. Having more of it doesn't make it any less technology. So it's like philosophy does not move at the same speed as tech. Marshall McLuhan soon after. Yep, Sinister Max. The year Fortune was launched. Okay, now we're just doing history in chat. The year Swedish fish candy was introduced. Wow, there was a time before Swedish fish. You know, crazy, amazing time to be alive. Okay, continuing. This point of view is presented, this is the organismic point of view, is presented as the only sound alternative to both mechanism and vitalism, whose limitations are effectively revealed in the opening chapters. Vitalism is found wanting because it involves a virtual surrendering of a scientific approach to biological phenomena. Mechanism is deemed unsatisfactory because it involves an inadequate model for the explanation of living things. The model is said to be made up of three leading ideas or conceptions. The first is the analytic summative conception, which regards the goal of biological inquiry as the analysis of organisms into elementary units and the explaining of organic characteristics by the summation of these units. The second is the machine theoretical conception, which considers the basis of vital order to lie in pre-established structures or mechanisms in the widest sense of the word. The third is the reaction theoretical conception, according to which an organism is like an automaton, reacting only when subjected to stimuli and otherwise completely passive. Bertalanffy argues that these ideas cannot give us an adequate understanding of life. Perhaps the book's major achievement is to show how they distort or disregard important biological facts. Lululemon is from the 90s, Liz Lemon is from the 2010s. That is amazing. Yeah. Lumen, the systems theory is from this time. Interesting, K-Pars. Yep. Yeah, so... But see, this is interesting because this is a 50s or theory from 1949 of biology. So you guys got to remember, in the history of philosophy, biological evolution coming from Darwin is a very, very recent phenomenon. Very recent. And so people are still hashing out these ideas. This isn't even 100 years after the theory came out. So it's like, yeah, this is like new. This is still very... it's still contemporary philosophy, to tell you the truth. But like this is still like new philosophy, basically, at this point. Like what counts as life in terms of evolution. Okay. The model provided by the organismic point of view is quite different. Without having recourse to any transcendental vital force or immanent teleology, it nevertheless rejects the basic idea of mechanism. More specifically, it replaces the analytic summative conception by the idea of biological organisms as wholes or systems which have unique system properties and obey irreducible system laws. Okay, so we're having an organism level as the fundamental thing. The year of Queen Elizabeth's coronation, cool. Is the woke mind virus alive? Yes, K-Pars, it is. It's in the hearts and minds of all of us. Like, why? The funny thing is, it's just like, I suspect it's always been this way. People are always so disappointed with, like, their governments. Like, or for the vast majority of time. It's like the idea that, like, there's a woke mind virus. It's bad. The year Stalin died. Cool. Yeah, 1953. Good year, it looks like. Impressive year. All right, the machine theoretical conception is replaced by a dynamic interpretation of living things wherein organic structures are due to a continuous flow of processes combining to produce patterns of immense intricacy. The reaction theoretical conception is jettisoned in favor of the view that the organism is primarily a center of activity, which is autonomous and not a mere response to external stimuli. Finally, the organismic model considers that biological systems are stratified so that, for example, viruses, genes, chromosomes, cells, multicellular individuals, superindividual aggregates, etc., form a hierarchy of levels exhibiting an increasing degree of complexity. The whole of nature indeed contains a tremendous architecture in which subordinate systems are united at successive levels into ever higher and larger systems. And you can see this sort of argumentation still being discussed nowadays about causal systems at different levels. Verdurian says, you're doing really good and not actually saying the word I'm not supposed to say. Kapar says, do sponges and jellyfish count? What, here? I'd assume so. Now, you have to remember, like, the conceptions of, like, symbiotic organisms, like things working together, like these are, I don't know when that like became a popular idea that people knew about stuff like that. And so that like there's different levels and that this organismic could be like super organisms. So maybe that's what they mean by super individual aggregates. I don't know what this means actually here. I'm just not, I just don't know. And so it's like, what exactly are they taking as the fundamental? Now they're saying the organism is the one we're trying to take as fundamental, but who knows exactly what that definition is. So here, Crick and Watson published Molecular Structure of Nucleic Acids, a structure for deoxyribose nucleic acid. Oh, wow. So this was still pre-DNA. For those who don't realize, Darwin was writing in a time pre-genetics. Like that came much later. Even the theories of like Mendel, where that there was some sort of thing going on underneath that was maintaining this, was unknown to Darwin at the time. And so Darwin was writing this theory, and all the underlying mechanisms that we just take for granted today did not exist. And so Mendel comes along afterwards. I don't know the history well enough. If someone in chat does know it better, please correct me. But like then starts with the crossing of peas and plants, starts to realize that there are traits that exist in the plant that are then like that you could find that remain stable over the generations. Then it came to this year, so almost 100 years later, before we had DNA, we actually found the molecules that had the properties that were being represented for like fit properties that were contributing to fitness or not. So yeah, so this is coming out. If this book and this paper came out in 1953, that means they did not know about DNA yet. When a thing becomes a part of a bigger thing, yes. Keepar says, yeah, because most of the movements are a single layer neurons, direct effectors that respond to stimuli, but no networks that modify relationship that we associate with brains. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know exactly what they countenance as an organism here. I mean, clearly we've got multicellular individuals, but that's not, symbiotic groups of things and the way, like the more complex structures we have nowadays. Okay. Yeah. Successive levels into even higher and larger systems. Yeah. What counts as a larger system? Like, don't know. When this architecture is looked at from the standpoint of physics, important differences can be seen, according to Bertalanffy, between inorganic and organic systems. The former are closed, whereas the latter are open. Closed systems form part of the subject matter of physical theory and have the following prominent features. 1. They exchange energy but not matter with their surroundings. 2. They tend to always in the direction of or are actually in a state of true equilibrium. 3. They conform to the laws of classical thermodynamics. In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics. Consequently, 4. They exemplify an increase of entropy and a decrease of internal order. Open systems, on the other hand, A. exchange matter as well as energy with their surroundings. B. Tend to maintain themselves at a constant distance from true equilibrium in a steady state. C. Do not conform to the laws of classical thermodynamics, but to laws so far unformulated in a scientific way. D. Tend to minimal or negative entropy production, and hence on occasion show an increase of internal order, heterogeneity, and complexity. I mean, this is the simple argument. People be like, well, where are we getting all of our energy if it's not like a religious thing that's organizing us? It's the sun. The sun is constantly giving us more and more energy, and we are processing it. But if you look at the overall physics of the solar system, we're losing energy because the sun is like expending a whole lot more energy than we can capture and all that stuff. But on the local like Earth living stuff, we are actually capturing energy from the sun. That's the external system, and using it for something. So that sort of thing. Yeah, we're like in a whirlpool. That's right. It's like we're capturing all this shit. January 19, 1953, 71.1 of all television sets in the United States are tuned into I Love Lucy to watch Lucy give birth to little Ricky, which is more people than those who turned into Dwight Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. The record is never broken. That is cool. Good for Lucy. I mean, we all thank Lucy. She saved Star Trek and did a lot of other cool things besides that. She shouldn't be remembered only for saving Star Trek, but she was cool. K-Par is a temporal structure which actually helps to maximize entropy globally. Yeah. Oh, minimize. We are making things, we're not losing energy. We are making things more internally consistent and complex here. That's what we do. We organize shit. And then it breaks down over time due to physics. But like life is an organizational thing. A little structure is fine if it messes everything up, lol. Yeah, well, that too. But I mean, that's what's going to happen. Like however humans go out, we may go out with a bang, we may blow ourselves up, but eventually all of our little things will just die off and go off into the universe. So, okay. One other point of contrast between the two types of system is crucial for the organismic conception. In an open system, the final steady state is not dependent on the initial conditions, but only on the system conditions, which control the ratio between the inflow and outflow of its component materials. Yeah, so the initial conditions of the Earth are not dependent on, do not show us how life is going to evolve. It somehow acts differently. Such a system therefore displays a directiveness or equifinality in its behavior. It can reach the same end result from different beginnings and in different ways. Closed systems rarely, if ever, behave in this manner. A change in their initial conditions usually leads to a change in final result. On the basis of all this, Bertalanffy offers the following tentative definition, quote, "A living organism is a hierarchical order of open systems which maintains itself in the exchange of components by virtue of its system conditions." Alright, and this sort of makes sense. It doesn't really matter exactly what food I eat, but I might still grow in the same way. Maybe not exactly the same, but you might think of the end state that I am in not to be a direct correlate to which food I eat on which day. So say mushrooms one day and carrots the next. Is that going to really change how I end up? Maybe not. Viper says 53 was really one hell of a year. March 26th, Jonas Salk announced his polio vaccine. That's big. May 5th, Aldous Huxley first tries psychedelic hallucinogen mescaline, inspiring the book The Doors of Perception. K-Par says, minimize locally and maximize on the large scale. We are ordered, but make tons of heat and waste and disperse things faster than it would be just waiting for things to diffuse into the perfect smoothness. Yes, and that's the point, is that we are somehow organizing on a, we're using all the technology that you are using to watch this broadcast now took huge amounts of energy and resources to create. And also including the transmission going into this. I mean, not to speak of anything of my fucking education, my entire life reading a million fucking philosophy articles and all that shit. Just the technology that you're using to watch this wasted tons of electricity and power and resources and probably lives for that matter. So it's yes, but overall, that organization to make this happen is highly controlled to make this broadcast possible. It all depends on mushrooms. Exactly, Verdurden. Truly, nearly inconceivable. Inconceivable. Yeah. Okay. Wait, American lives? Exactly, says Semiotics. Yeah, probably those too. I mean, we probably went and killed a lot of people, but, a few Americans died in the process. I mean, and don't worry, that's a sacrifice our leaders are willing to make. To establish the soundness of the organismic conception in general and the above definition in particular, the author seeks to show how they illuminate such matters as embryonic development, genetic processes, growth, self-regulation, metabolism, evolution, etc. What's up, Cost? Hey, you like it when you're forceful and angry? I don't think I've been actually that angry on stream. I was thinking about this not too long ago. I think Retheus asked a question, and it was a real question. I looked right at the thing. I answered very directly, and Retheus was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't make you angry." I was like, "That's not me being angry. That's you actually had a real question, and me being I'll give you a real fucking answer." I'm not against, like, if you have a question, I'll try to answer it. But it's like, yes, I can be more direct. Most of the time I'm fucking around on streaming. That's what it's for. It's like, we're discussing. But like, yeah, if you ask, like, if there's something that comes up that's real, it's like, yeah. September 4th, the discovery of REM sleep. I wonder if that was related to Aldous Huxley taking drugs. Okay, continuing. Ross says, my favorite thing I've ever said to me was, fuck you, Rod Durden. Yeah, I was in the Daniel Matt stream, and I've had the Daniel Matt say, fuck you, Noger, I think twice. But he's like, you know what? Fuck you, Noger. Because I called him out on some of his bullshit. Like, he was having fun. It was all in good fun, but, like, I did call him out. But he was like, yeah. I was like, fuck you. It's like, what the hell? Whether the case he presents is a strong one, actually, and for anyone who doesn't know, this is one of my favorite places to hang out on Twitch. He's a fiction writer, but like he's a real smart dude. Knows a lot about, like, he's on like the less science side of things, more on the literature side of things. So, you know, I get a little bit on philosophy. I'm gonna give him a shout out. That's all I was gonna do. The Daniel Matt, and so he's a fiction writer. He writes in French, so I don't know. Like, he's like, people like his books in French, but he's going through Elden Ring at the moment. But if you like chatty streams, you can go hang out with the Daniel Matt. Viper says, someone recently heard me talk and was like, oh, Viper sounds a lot friendlier than he comes across in chat. Viper's is really nice. Like, we've spoken, like, we've had, like, discussions before. Viper's is very nice. Viper's just has, you know, got the Irish wit. Like, that can be a little biting and cutting, as we want it to be. So... You know, in person, I don't talk philosophy very much, but I think, almost exactly the same, or as much, very similar to, like, I have no interest in trying to, like, present a, like, a character. Like, this is, granted, my space. We're reading stuff, I like philosophy stuff, so it's like, yeah, I will discuss it here. Generally, I don't, but other than that, I think I'm basically... like my normal self. I'm not trying to present. I once was hanging out with CJ from NJ, one of my Minesweeper streamer friends, and I was shocked when I hung out with her. She was toned down on stream. Most people are kind of hyped up to like do their stream thing. She was actually more like exuberant in person. She was more CJ from NJ than she was in like on stream. Like when she has to like sit quietly in front of her camera, that actually like restricts her. In person, she's just like even more. And I was like, oh my God, you're like a lot. She was like, yeah. I was like, okay. It's kind of funny. Okay. Anywho's. But yeah, like I said, Daniel Matt's a good stream. He usually streams like 4 or 5 days a week. So it's like if you're, and he's European, but he streams Degen European hour, well, not Degen, but like at the night in Europe. So maybe some people here would be willing to watch. All right. Whether the case he presents is a strong one must, of course, be ultimately decided by the experts in biology. But from a philosophical standpoint, much of the discussion seems impressive, especially when it is directed towards the problem of ontogenetic organization and functioning. Thus, the author argues persuasively that an understanding of embryonic development no longer requires the taking of sides to the old contest between performationism and epigenesis. So yeah, see this preformationism. I don't know what this is. We don't talk about this anymore. But we still have epigenetics. So epigenesis is still something. Okay, to account for the appearance of a fully formed individual out of the undifferentiated mass of a fertilized ovum, we do not need to postulate any pre-established anlagen, Aristotelian potencies, or nisus formativus. Yeah, so this is these are these old theories. Like I said, you guys you probably don't realize, because I've thought about this. Maybe you do realize, but like the time between Darwin and Watson and Crick, who the fuck knew what was going on? And so they had these old theories here of like what actually was driving people, and they were still considering Aristotelian potencies. That was still a good theory, you know, of what is making an organism grow the way it is. It's not the DNA. There was no such thing as DNA. Viper says preformationism is a discredited biological theory, historically popular in the 17th and 18th centuries, which proposed that organisms develop from miniature preformed versions of themselves within the egg or sperm. Essentially, it argued that development was simply an enlargement of the pre-existing structures, not a process of new structure formation. See? Like, we don't even think about this shit anymore. Thank you, Vipers. But, like, this is the sort of stuff that there's also really cool old, like, woodblock prints from back in the day where they, like, have a fake, like, they, like, enhance a sperm, and it looks like there's a little man inside the sperm. You can go find this image of, like, what is a sperm from, like, 1800s. So, like, one of those old, like, book prints where there's, like, a little guy curled up in the sperm. So, like, the sperm is going, just, like, leaving the man's body, going into the woman where it grows, but it's not doing anything else. So, yeah. Is this it? Did you get it? Let's find out. Yeah. Of course it doesn't work. First time. Yeah, so it looks like this. So yeah, you can see, like, this is a sperm. And so there's a sperm with, like, some little body all just sort of like squinched in there. So yes. Yep. So fun stuff. So, like, all the old, and the fun stuff, I can't speak today. I haven't streamed in a week. Part of the fun for me is, like, a lot of these arguments really aren't any different nowadays. They've just been changed and updated, but, like, the arguments are pretty, like, we're not that clever. The same sort of theories are happening, just a little different as it comes through time. I read a book by someone called Noga Arika on the history of medicine, and you can just see, like, all the stuff we think we're doing now in medicine, like all this, like, biology, you think it's, like, all fancy and stuff. It's all the same old theories, just rehashed in new ways. So yeah. Okay, so these are all the old theories that, like, we just this year when this paper came out. So after this paper came out, probably this sort of thing, all these things are starting to fall by the wayside at this point. Like, they had no idea. Anyway, we can proceed on the hypothesis that the developing embryo is a total system whose growth is determined by internal system conditions, that is, by a specific Gestalt principle immanent in the organism. You see this shit? Yeah, this is exactly it. They didn't have the DNA. There's a fucking Gestalt principle, whatever the fuck that means at this time, that is inside the organism, but they have no understanding of that it is genetic yet. Gestalt, yeah. Exactly, Latvian. But, like, that, see? Interesting fucking history stuff here. The ostensible teleology manifested by this process is simply an illustration of the equifinality which characterizes the behavior of open systems. Bertalanffy does not imply for a moment that this approach is a substitute for a detailed empirical investigation in embryology, or that it solves all major problems in the field. He expressly states that a fully satisfactory theory of development does not exist at present, but he gives weighty reasons for thinking that when such a theory is formulated, it will contain organismic concepts. So you can see the philosophy here was prefiguring the scientific progress. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's only by a few years. The ideas were in the air. I mean, for all we know, I mean, when was it? There was that lady. Like, all the experiments may have actually been done for the preceding few years. I don't remember the exact history of this stuff, but like, they had been doing experiments and trying to formulate the exact chemistry of this sort of thing. But, like, so maybe some people knew. But again, this book that this paper is on is from 1949. So chances are they weren't doing experiments for 4 years. Sometime in the period after the book, but during when this paper was written. Okay. There's another part of the author's discussion, however, which is not so convincing. He makes clear the fact that biological systems are profoundly historical entities. Every organism is derived from others of the same kind and bears within itself traits from its own past as well as from the history of the generations which preceded it. Yet in his definition of a living organism, he deliberately omits any reference to these historical features on the ground that they are something about which we can say little in an exact way. The omission leads one to ask whether there is a deficiency in the organismic conception at this point. A similar question seems to be raised by the author's treatment of evolution. Again, maybe the author was smart in that they knew they didn't know enough about, like, there was no DNA, so they stayed silent. This author is like, well, you should have said something. It is usual to distinguish two main aspects of this topic: A, the descriptive or historical aspect, and B, the explanatory or causal aspect. Bertalanffy says little about A, but devotes his attention to B, with special reference to the powerful interpretation which combines the findings of genetics and the tenets of Darwinian natural selection. So they did know something of the genetics here. Did they know about the DNA? No, or they must not have. But they did know something about genetics, so there was something. The interpretation purports to give a causal account of the origin of subspecies, species and genera, higher systematic units such as classes and phyla, ecological adaptations to definite environments, and complex morphological and physiological integration within the organism. The author holds that the interpretation does adequately explain 1 and 3, that's subspecies and species and genera, and ecological adaptations, the so-called microevolutionary process, but he thinks that if 2 and 4 are to be adequately explained, something more than the factors admitted by modern selection theory is required. So that's higher systematic units such as classes and phyla, and complex morphological and physiological integration within the organisms. Macroevolution seems to point to the working of a primordial creativity which expresses itself in the production of the vast multiplicity of organic forms. Yeah, so again, we're trying to get there. What is the primordial creativity which expresses itself? I mean, the DNA. This is the primordial shit that gets expressed, but they just don't know. Moreover, selection theory implies that the whole course of evolution is a series of accidents and hence fortuitous. Such an implication, the author contends, must be unacceptable to scientific biology, which is bound to seek for definite laws governing the evolutionary process. Now, this is interesting. We still don't have hardcore definite laws in biology like we do in physics. It would take something different than what we've been up to. And so this is actually, I think, is still a standing problem. I have very old work on this that I did. Reorganizing the causal structure of evolution to work better with laws. But again, no one cares about that. They all ignored me when I tried telling them. So whatever. Anyway, finally, Darwinian selection theory incorporates a number of ideas drawn from English political and economic thought in the 19th century, for example, competition, usefulness, progress, etc. But are these ideas adequate for the understanding of 2 billion years of the Earth's history? The author tends to reply in the negative. And this is interesting. This still gets brought up. When I was taught, when I took philosophy of biology, it's like they were saying, well, why do you think like competition and like market characteristics are actually what biology does? Why do you think competition, usefulness, progress, like they had in like mid-century 1800s, is the way to explain what's going on in life over thousands of years? That seems a little bit capitalistic, actually. And so, Watson Crick announced their discovery in DNA in February, released a paper in April, and this paper is from December, so it's possible he read it. Yes. Possible. I'd say unlikely, because the question is, and this is a legit I don't know, did people actually understand what Watson and Crick had actually done when it got released? Because, you know, people may have like in that community understood it, but would it have gotten to like the ears of a philosopher in the course of a few months? So it's like, yeah, even though it may have been released, did people actually understand what it meant in this area? And maybe, like, this person obviously cares about philosophy of biology, so maybe they were listening to what the scientists were putting out, but I don't know. Yeah, it was published in Nature, so, well, fair. I mean, again, how much did the philosophers pay attention to the science? We'd hope plenty, but doesn't mean it happened. But yeah, I mean, this is a good point, Vipers. But what I was saying is, I remember actually, this is just like a little pat on my back. I was taking philosophy biology, and my teacher brought up the point that capitalism. Why do you think, like, why do we have evolution that looks like capitalism? And like, why is that like, wouldn't that be massively convenient for the capitalistic worldview that nature just happens to follow this? It would support capitalism. Maybe this is just not a good way of viewing things. Maybe this is just the pro-capitalism sort of thing. And we have to find it's just not a way that we should really be thinking about evolution. And it's just our capitalistic bent that makes us like it. I said, we could have communist evolution too. The species that die out, go extinct, were the ones that couldn't get along in their ecosystem. You can just flip all of our capitalistic, all the biological things on its head. Instead of things competing, it's just ones that fail to get along in their ecosystems. Ones that fail to actually find their niche within their community. And ones that fail to, produce for the greater good. My teacher moved on immediately. And then I was like, oh, okay, I guess he thought it was good enough or whatever. Maybe it'd been said. Then the next week or something, he said that fucking blew his mind. He said no one had ever said that before, or at least he had never heard it. And so he was just like, yeah, I was shocked. He said, I don't even remember who said it because I was so shocked when it got said. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, yeah, that's me. That took a lot of metaphysics. Yeah. Very Kropotkin, yeah. So, but it's like, yeah, this is a still regarded as a good criticism of evolution, that it really is a product of 18th century British economics. Okay. The above critical comments, although, communism had been around plenty of time, so this person could have been a communist. So I was just thinking, well, when did the USSR start? But that doesn't matter. The above critical comments, especially when considered in detail, are certainly of interest. Yet even if one admits their validity, it is by no means clear what contribution the organismic conception has to make to the issues raised. Perhaps the author does not intend that it should so contribute, though he says, quote, while fully appreciating modern selection theory, nevertheless we arrive at an essentially different view of evolution, end quote. One wonders, however, about the relevance of the organismic conception to evolution on its historical side. Since the conception is advanced primarily as a basis for exact biology, which aims at the formulation of precise quantitative laws, what application can it have to the case where there is just a single complex process? Within the evolutionary process, laws may well be operative insofar as there are recurrent series of events. But is the process in its entirety amenable to anything more than historical description, or possibly to explanation in terms of non-quantitative principles? The author himself seems to be hinting at something like this when he remarks, quote, so evolution appears to be more than the mere product of chance governed by profit. It seems a cornucopia of evolution creatrice, a drama full of suspense, of dynamics and tragic complications. Life spirals laboriously upward to higher and even higher levels, paying for every step. The meaning of this play is unknown unless it is what the mystics have called God's attaining to awareness of himself, end quote. Yeah, so it just seems like evolution is going somewhere, but to where it would not be governed by evolution. A number of further topics, such as the definition of an organic whole, the relation between biology and physics, the unity of science, and the discipline to which Bertalanffy has called general system theory, are taken up in the later chapters of the book. Much that is said on these topics is worthy of comment, but they must be passed over. One closes the book with a keen sense of the attractiveness which the organismic concepts have for most people who reflect on the philosophical basis of biology. Just because these concepts are so attractive, they must be made to meet the severest demands of logic and empirical fact wherever they are used. Bertalanffy's acute, wide-ranging discussion is a good example of the kind of treatment they require. Oh, look at this. Although Professor Schrodinger's Science and Humanism is a rather desultory consideration of a number of themes in contemporary physics, its pages are sprinkled with stimulating ideas, only a few of which can be noted here. I shall merely select certain of the ideas which seem to have a striking similarity to those advanced by Bertalanffy in expounding his organismic conception of life. It is interesting. Now we've got name dropping. We've got Schrodinger. This is probably the Erwin Schrödinger, you know? Like this dude. Like a big name. Near the beginning of his book, Schrödinger raises the question of how we can best picture the domain of matter in the light of the discoveries due to quantum theory. Up to the beginning of the present century, matter was thought to be composed of certain ultimate particles which maintained their identity through long stretches of time, just like the coarse, palpable objects of our everyday environment. Yeah, so they were still using atom theory up until before, quantum theory. Each particle was an individual entity whose individuality was based on the identity of the material in it. This is Greek atom theory, just updated for the 19th century. The physical discoveries of the last few decades compel us, according to Schrödinger, to reject this picture. We must dismiss the idea that a particle is an individual entity which in principle retains its sameness forever. Quite the contrary. We are now obliged to assert that the ultimate constituents of matter have no sameness at all. Accordingly, if at a certain instant a particle is observed at a certain point, this is to be considered in principle as an isolated event. Even if at the next instant we observe a similar particle at an adjacent point, and even if there is every reason to assume a causal connection between the first observation and the second, there is no true unambiguous meaning in the assertion that it is the same particle we have observed in the two cases. We can no longer believe with Newton in solid, hard, massy, impenetrable particles which are eternally the same. Is there then no element of permanence in these ultimate constituents of matter? The answer Schrödinger suggests is that their permanence consists wholly in their form or shape, but this is not the shape of some material substance. To think so is to perpetuate the old Aristotelian matter and form distinction, which simply does not apply to the domain of microphysical entities. Viper says, yep, Erwin Schrödinger's Science and Humanism, Physics in Our Time was published in 1952. Ivan, welcome in. Thanks for the raid. How was your chat? What did you guys end up chatting about? How you doing? We're actually reading some classic philosophy of science at this point. Yeah, welcome in. And of course, as always, Ivan, if you need to raid and run, feel free. Physics in Our Time? No, yeah, we were just talking. Schrödinger's name, we're reading an old paper suggested about, talking about like a book on evolutionary biology, and this is from 1953. And so this book on biology is now getting compared to a book by Erwin Schrödinger, like the Schrödinger, because it just came out in 52, apparently, or whatever it was Viper said. So it's like we're just talking about actual like comparisons between this book on biology and then Schrödinger's book on the nature of like matter in our world. Yeah, welcome in. Hi, chat from hi Ivan Neo's chat. I'm Noah. Noger, No Gray, No Grayo, whatever you want to call me. Just don't be a jerk about it. I'm philosopher. I am weird person really, but like what I do is I chat philosophy here. I'm primarily work in the area of philosophical logic, metaphysics, theory of knowledge, and do some philosophy of science also. And so it's like, if you want to talk about some of the more arcane bits of philosophy, I might know something about it. But like, yeah, welcome in and let me know what's going on. So yeah, we tried to convert him to Islam. Just kidding. I mean, Islam's one of the great religions. Perilous 3D, he told us that since we rolled a 1, we were stuck on this planet. That's true, you are. Jacques Sapier, right on. Yep, Sinister Maximus, yes, yes, Ivan. So yeah, so Vox Fam, what's up? Yeah, welcome in, our man, HD, Adam Fighter, what's going on? Yeah, you were here, I think. Perilous 3D, welcome in. Yeah, so let me know, and like I said, Ivan, thanks for the raid. If you need a raid and run, feel free to do so. Oops, wrong button. But yeah, this is Organismic Concepts in Biology and Physics, and this paper came out in 1953. And 1953 is an interesting year. Vipers, our mod, has been looking at what happened in 1953. Watson and Crick published their results on the study of DNA, like the existence of the DNA molecule in 1953, earlier in the year when this paper came out. Biology, evolutionary biology, between the time Darwin published through 1953, did not have a theory of how it actually worked. They just didn't know. And so we were just saying stuff up here where they have these old fucking weird theories where we just don't know what's going on. They just don't understand, and they're using these old things. So it's like there's something analogan, Aristotelian potencies, nisus formativus, like these old theories of like what could possibly be doing the work. Now they knew it was chemistry, or they assumed it was, but they couldn't really figure it out. They did not know what actually was generating our traits and features. They just assumed it was some sort of potentiality, going back to the old Aristotelian terms. And so this is coming out right at the time when the chemistry is getting discovered. And so it's very interesting to hear kind of how the philosophers were looking at it, and how the theories of philosophy were actually progressing at the time, and kind of how they were progressing in tandem. So this is a theory in which a DNA conception of generation, that's kind of part of how we grow, is via our DNA. That actually fits in with this theory here. So yeah. How off were they in the abstract? I didn't read the abstract. I never read abstracts. Yeah. But yeah, so now we've moved on from some of the meat of the theory that we were discussing earlier, in talking about the book on the organismic theory of biology in a wider context. So we're just starting to talk about Schrödinger. How far off were they in the abstract? I meant, it's the mechanics of their theory. They didn't get in. This is a review of a book, kind of, so they didn't get into the details. This person actually took them to task for not giving enough detail and just being kind of agnostic about it. And so it's a fair question. It was just like this reviewer was just like, yeah, I would have liked them to have said a little bit more how this works, but like the author is just kind of hands off. We don't know this stuff. And so there was a question that they brought up earlier about, well, how does history play into your theory here? And they said they were kind of quiet on this. And of course, history, will change the DNA, but they don't have a physical molecule that they can say is the carrier of like the modifications over time. So they don't have that. So this author was just sort of like, we don't know, but it must happen. If you take out funny words, were they dealing with reality in a sense? Yeah, that's the whole point, is that this is trying to use the words as best we can when we don't have like a good scientific theory that like we can say, hey, look, DNA, and we can like go study it. Well, what must it be? What kind of structures, like theoretically, what properties must it have that it could do all this work in organisms that we do observe? Our man says, I feel like I need to go away and do a PhD in philosophy before I start reading that book. No. I mean, you want to hang out here? We talk philosophy. You hang out in Ivan's, he talks philosophy. You don't need a PhD to do jack shit. I mean, it helps, but you don't. I mean, what's your purpose? Like, if you want to go like publish philosophy papers, you might need to like, study up. But I mean, you can still get something out of these philosophy papers. That's kind of what I do here. Try to explain what's going on in the philosophy. So feel free to ask questions. I know not all of it's going to be clear. You're just chicken? Yes, you are a Latvian Jesus. Nope, Jacques says. Okay. So, but yeah, like feel free to ask questions. I don't look at my lurk list. If you want to lurk, I know I got a bunch of people that lurk and don't talk. Like they don't want to talk, whatever reason. It's cool. You don't need no PhD to talk. I say if you just want to spam emotes, we have people who just spam emotes. That's fine too. So, okay, where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about physics. Yeah. Yeah, so we have moved beyond the old atom theory with Newton of solid, hard, massy, impenetrable particles. Can't do it anymore. Paolo says, I don't know dates well enough. I know Mendeleev had a rough working model and was just curious if there was any conjectures in this paper. Sounds like they remain pretty pragmatic. Yeah, so they mention the word genetics. I think they had the idea, and of course, Watson and Crick's paper came out early in this year, and so this person could have read the Watson and Crick's paper and known about DNA when they were writing this. They could have. We don't know. But of course, people were looking for this in the last few years, so they had an idea that the solution would be genetic of this sort. So they said that, but I would guess that this person didn't quite understand the significance of DNA yet, but they knew it had to be something like that. Latvian says, I'm just not very educated in philosophy, but stir shit all the time. Yeah, that's fair. No PhD. We're not philosophy Nazis. Ha ha ha. No. I mean, I don't have a PhD. I mean, I've spent way more time on this than I should have, but it's like, yeah. Perla says it's amazing how quickly something can become so obvious after we find it. Yeah, well, hindsight's 2020. It's very easy, and there's a lot of things in the history of philosophy like this, and people just assume this is how it's always been. There was a period, I forget when it was, in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, there was no concept of variable in mathematics. Variables didn't exist. You didn't have find this x. It didn't, like, you didn't say that. There was no x to be found. There was no concept of variable. It didn't exist in the parlance. People before that said, imagine something along the lines that it has these properties. Like this that has the properties such that. Like this that has, it's only even. Or this that has properties of that sort of thing. But they had to say all these sort of like fancy language things to get the math across, and they were doing good math. But like you can't be like x plus 1 equals 4. What's x? X is 3. That doesn't exist before that, and they were doing math in that world. It's like people think like this has just been this way forever. It took a lot of thinking to get the idea of variable. Viper says, at the end of the 16th century, Francois Viet introduced the idea of representing known and unknown numbers by letters nowadays called variables, the idea of computing with them as if they were numbers in order to obtain the results by simple replacement. So it was at the end of the 1500s we got it. Thank you, Vipers. But like, yeah, so the sad part is that's a lot later than I thought it was. I thought it was in like the 1200s. I think maybe the Arabic mathematicians had something, but I guess if like wherever you got that might be it. I mean, Francois sounds French, so maybe not the Arabs, but it's like, yeah, this is a modern invention. Like it's contemporary in terms of philosophy. It ain't no ancient thing. Perilous says, yeah, they're doing Riemann sums for a long time before Homeboy went off and proved his shorthand was rigorous. So it's like, yeah, a lot of stuff in hindsight. People will have no idea. Like this little bit of syntax, a variable that you can use like an X, a letter for a number. Huge amounts of work went into that. And people don't realize this. Perilous says, I always assumed Pythagoras had them. I see how the knowledge was so much harder to convey. Yeah, it's the history of science and math and philosophy, for that matter, is filled with these things. Where we just did not like what the people had to work with at the time and what they were able to accomplish is very impressive. It just takes a lot of understanding to see what they were actually up to because our world is so different. I always bring up the example of probability. Probability did not exist in the way we understand it today. It didn't exist at all. No one came up with the idea until Pierre de Fermat and Blaise Pascal started conversing about how to work out outcomes of betting games. There's a game called Problem of the Points, and they were trying to figure out what the outcomes were and like how you should bet. And so they just had a series of letters, and we have some of the letters still. There's like, they're dated in like the 1500s or whatever. They come up with the concept of probability. And so the day before they came up with that, if someone asked you what it would be like tomorrow, you'd say, how would I know what tomorrow is going to be like? That's in God's hands. That's all you could say. But nowadays you say, well, look, you can look at the history. You can say, these are the different possible outcomes. You hear that? Possible outcomes. That's a probabilistic concept. You couldn't say that before. Like, it's more likely to be warm than cold because of like these, the weather is the way it is. You can't say that sort of thing. It doesn't make sense. Viper says, individual mathematicians used letter notation before that, but it wasn't formally adopted until Viet. Interesting. It was like a war game. Yeah. Oh, there's two reasons why probability got developed, Perilous. One was gambling, and the other one was war. You wanted to find out where your bombs were going to land, and so you wanted to, have like probabilistic spreads of where your bombs are going to land. That's why people do math, is you find out parabolas to know where your bomb is going to land, and you do probability to understand how that works, and also betting and like gambling. So a lot of mathematics surrounding probabilities in games and math and things like that were paid for by professional gamblers. They paid off mathematicians to study the mathematics known at the time to give them an edge in betting games. Viper says the introduction of XYZ as symbols of unknown quantities is due to Descartes, who, that's the plane, XYZ plane, who, in order to provide symbols of unknown corresponding to the symbols ABC of knowns, took the last letter of the alphabet Z for the first unknown, proceed backwards to Y and X for the second and third, respectively. Ah, cool, yeah, because he did like the X and Y plane. And so the idea that you could actually represent numbers in a physical space is also mind-blowing. Like, no one had ever done that before. So, yeah. Kedio says, hey, what's up, Kedio? I don't know anything about probability and gambling in video games, nothing at all. Yeah. No, you wouldn't ever know anything about sort of like drops in video games. Another Descartes win, yeah. Mathematicians finding secondary income. Yeah, well, dude, you have to understand also, mathematics was also paid for mathematics. In like mathematicians, the first paid mathematicians were astrologers, not astronomers, astrologers. They were paid to figure out astrology charts, so to do things at the most auspicious time. So again, this is a gambling issue, really. So it was astrologers figuring out the most auspicious times, but they became astronomers in setting mathematics to the celestial bodies. Humanity is a wild ass concept. Yeah. So. Okay. We're almost done with this paper anyway. It's all in stars. Exactly. So, I mean, that is the history of mathematics as a profession, is basically gambling, war, and medicine. Yeah. I don't think a system as irrational as humanity could evolve, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Well, there's still a lot of stuff out there to discover. So, I mean, evolution did it, but that doesn't cover all the things in the world. Viper says astronomer, nom nom nom, delicious, more of that, please. Astrologer, log, a unit of poo. What goes downstairs together in pairs. It's log, log, log. Okay. Okay, let's finish this up. Yeah. Is there then no element of permanence in these ultimate constituents of matter? The answer Schrödinger suggests is that their permanence consists wholly in the form of in their form or shape. But this is not the shape of some material substance. To think so is to perpetuate the old Aristotelian matter and form distinction, which simply does not apply to the domain of microphysical entities. The ultimate constituents of matter are therefore, as it were, pure shape, nothing but shape. What turns up again and again in successive observations is this shape, not an individual speck of material. Yeah, so this is the idea that like we're dealing with structural properties. There's no like substance underneath. We're only looking at the mathematical structures and shape of like geometries in physics. Natural Lab. Grease Carpaccio says, I used to cower in fear and drop to my knees when I'd see a big, strong, sweaty man try to touch my face with his clammy hands. Then I started doing push-ups, and now I go to the beach and flex on all the smaller, weaker men. That's your truth, and I won't let the government censor you. You do you, Grease Carpaccio. Jacques says, push, sis. Yeah. Adam says, as the saying goes, when all else fails, they send you to war or medicine. Who wants a Rona shot? Yeah, well. Welcome to the United States at the moment, where who the fuck knows what's going to happen in a few months. And speaking thus, we should, of course, understand shape or gestalt in a much wider sense than as geometrical shape. Particles are not tiny spheres, cubes, pyramids, etc. The fact is that what we require here is not a visual model at all. It is a conceptual model. And as in the case of cosmology, there is no question of the model being compared directly with the actual facts. Consequently, it is better to say that the model is adequate rather than true. Y'all gonna love El Salvador? Yeah. Twitch is wild. Yes, it is. Was gone for like a couple of days, forgot what it was like. Yeah, dude. I didn't stream for a full week because I took last Wednesday off because I was angry at my work, and last weekend off because it was like holiday stuff I had to deal with the family. And it's like, you get back for a weekend. It's just like, streaming. What the fuck? Welcome to Sananda. Yeah. Sananda? Yeah. You lost your readers. We're all losing our minds. It's okay. A great deal of the difficulty we encounter in trying to understand microphysical processes, Schrödinger contends, arise from an assumption we make that these processes must be susceptible to exact, continuous description. This assumption seems to work at the molar level, and we unconsciously regard it as applicable universally. But if we take the term continuous in a strict mathematical sense, it is doubtful whether the assumption really applies anywhere. Quote, "The idea of a continuous range, so familiar to mathematicians in our days, is something quite exorbitant and enormous extrapolation of what is really accessible to us. The idea that you should really indicate the exact values of any physical quantity for all the points of a continuous range, say between 0 and 1, is a bold extrapolation. We never do anything else than determine the quantity approximately for a very limited number of points and then draw a smooth curve through them. This serves us well for many practical purposes, but from the point of view of theory of knowledge, it is totally different from a supposed exact continual description." End quote. Thank you for the follow. Balak Dunbasher. They had no idea it would resemble logic? Yeah. Haven't been reading any news? Yeah, I don't blame you, Caudio. News is not fun. Well, histones? I don't know what histone is. Histories, maybe? I could talk about that. Like, a histone is like some sort of like... I don't know what a histone is. In inhibition of promoter regions, it is though, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, trying to piece together exactly the different theories of science and how it all works. Like, it's a really hard problem. I think the actual state of the art at the moment is basically let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's like, let the biologists do the biology, let the physicists do the physics, and don't worry about a grand theory that everything has to conform to the same way. Because even though different sciences have different standards, we're still making progress in the different sciences, and you can't use the standards we use in physics that we use in, say, like psychology. Does that mean the psychologists don't know anything? No, the psychologists know stuff. It's different than in physics, but like, yeah, and are there replication problems across science? Yes, but like, that doesn't mean the psychologists are stupid. They know stuff. So it's like, you have to, it's like, yeah, could we look at this stuff and say, should we be applying the model of physics to biology? Maybe this is wrong-headed right here, you know? Basically, if it's coiled, it can't be read, so it can be affected what's read in a genome epigenetically, yeah. Should you know the chemical makeup off the top of your head? No. But I mean, again, like, what are we trying to explain with the chemical makeup here? This is philosophy of biology, trying to explain what's going on in evolution, not what's going on in physics, or chemistry for that matter. K-Par says there's a replication crisis in cosmology too. Null hypothesis significance tense has ruined so many disciplines. Yeah. Likelihood is besthood? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so this is the last page. We are no doubt entitled to affirm that physical dependencies do approximate to functions of a mathematical kind for which continuous descriptions can be indicated.
I salute you.
Thank you for the follow, Wangju. But to assume that physical dependence is of this simple type is a bold epistemological step and probably an inadmissible step. If so, why should we feel uncomfortable when evidence points to the presence of discontinuity in nature? Schrödinger's discussion lends support to Bertalanffy's contention that the idea of Gestalten is a fruitful one not only for biology but for other branches of science as well. The parallel between the model of a biological system as a gestalt due to the dynamic interplay of processes and the model of a physical particle as likewise a gestalt of a dynamic sort is certainly remarkable. Okay, so they're treating the organism kind of like an atom with properties or like having a shape. So again, for people who didn't come in at the beginning, this theory is kind of treating the organism as the fundamental unit of evolution. And so they're treating the organism as something that is the bearer of the properties. And that is what's interacting with the rest of the world. And so now what they're saying is using this as a sort of like physical model is kind of what's going on here. So this sort of gestalt, this overall makeup, this structure that is the organism is how we should look at biology in that sort of system at that point, using the organism as the sort of unit that you're going to do science on. Okay. Equally remarkable is the elusiveness of the mere individual in the two domains. If a particle should no longer be considered an individual entity, neither, it appears, should an organism. Quote, strictly speaking, there is no biological individuality, but only a progressive individuation, both phylogenetic and ontogenetic. Individuality is a limit which is approached but not reached either in development or in evolution, end quote. Both Bertalanffy and Schrödinger are prepared to countenance an element of discontinuity in their respective domains. For the former, the discontinuity is seen primarily in the existence of the different levels which make up the architecture of organic nature. For the latter, this discontinuity is required both by the observational evidence and by the intricacies of the continuum taken in the strict mathematical sense. Philosophers who keep abreast of current scientific trends will not wish to ignore these contentions. University of Toronto. Then they knee-jerked in response to this and eradicated epigenetics till sometime in the 2010s. Yep, that's correct. But we are now at the end of the paper and we review the paper. Tell me how you feel about it. And if you're new here, what we have is an emote review. These are better TTV emotes. So if it just shows up like text and not the way it looks in chat below, you can install the better TTV plugin and it will help you around Twitch. You'll see like SAGs all of a sudden everywhere. But anyone in chat is now welcome to use the emotes to review the paper. If you think this was a fun paper and made your brain dance, you give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count. Nog Stream for existential artistic drama, Nog Oro for Ouroboros deeper ancient ideas, Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments, Nog Navel gazing only for academics, Nog Turd for all style no substance, still poop underneath, and Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and also my vote meh. So if you just like it and you think it's good, vote yay, bad, vote nay. And I do give a numerical score to these things. So anything in the green makes the score go up, anything in the red makes the score go down, and the vote meh actually pushes everything to the middle. And you can reuse emotes too, and it all kind of adds together. Thank you for rating Sinister X. Gave it a yay. K-Pars also. Knife, meh, braindance, and yay. Thank you. Perilous says, meanwhile, a farm boy you knew, epigenetics, was real because you had seen so many kittens, had to keep your mouth shut, so many spirits. Yeah. So different theories come and go, and once they had the DNA, they wanted to focus on the DNA. They didn't want to talk about like the flags that were, controlling how the DNA was expressed. That took more chemistry, that took a lot longer. But people want to just jump on the bandwagon at that point. It's how people are. No big deal. Perilous gives it yay, thank you. Viper says, I don't know how to assess it. It was like he was talking about Pokemon, which I don't understand. That's fair. This was a sort of a review paper of a bygone era. But you can say, did it... Thank you for the follow, Jacques. If I'm saying your name to anyone who's following wrong, just let me know. Balak said, same. Balak doesn't know. That's okay. You can review it as you feel. That's all this is. This is not the most, don't worry, this is not going on the permanent record. Sometimes the authors do find out about my reviews, but it's all good. They cooked up a germline barrier theory, lasted for decades. Yeah, people come up with stuff. All right, so that's cool. You weren't here? He died in 1990.
Uni 100.
Thank you for the 100 bits, Ivan. Appreciate it. Thank you for the bits and the raid. Rodern said, I can't remember what part of the paper and what part was outside in discourse, but I've enjoyed it. Hashtag 420. Yes. Brain dance. Thank you for the rating. Yeah, we've had review papers. I've read review papers before. And it's hard to give them a real review because they're describing someone else's ideas. And this is always the case. It makes it tough. But do you think, the way I'm going to look at this is did they express the ideas well? And I thought they did. I think they said, look, the organismic model is very contemporary for them, where it explains certain things. They gave the author some shit for maybe falling down on not coming up with a theory of how it actually has a causal structure, but like they couldn't really do that without the genetics, which was coming, which was right there. And so, yeah. Let me see, what am I going to give it? But this was, I thought, a fun paper because it did touch on some of the old theories. And I'm a sucker for this stuff. So I like the idea that it was talking about the old Aristotelian theories. Like the old, like we had that Vipers had that picture where you're talking about like the sperm with like a little person hidden inside it, and that's actually how the genetics works. It's not that we combine DNA, it's that like in sperm there's actually a very small person that's fully formed and then just grows. That's it. Yep. So, yep. And you like the old theories too? Yeah, Adam. I mean, this is one of the reasons. I'm a little anachronistic. I'm out of time. I like my old metaphysics. I like my old philosophy of science. Let's see. What else should I give this? I mean, they're going to get a Nog knife. This was an analytic paper, just analytic style. I'm more of I'm not a hipster. I'm more beatnik than hipster, but yeah. Perilous is right. Just dredging up some of the old stuff is interesting. It is. I mean, getting a knife, it's gonna get. I gave it a brain dent. It's a knife. I mean, but it's not like it's the greatest thing ever. It's gonna get a vote meh, and maybe a vote yay also. It's like you can combine the ratings. Doing acid and reading Heidegger. Yeah, I've not. Well, have I done acid? I've done something. No, I've not done acid.